as we continue on, let's look at some sexual stereotypes that you can really discuss in your discussion board assignment this week, or just kind of really put through your mind and evaluate whether or not in your experience these things are true, or are they completely false and are false stereotypes set up on individual experiences that cannot be generalized. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but one of the very top ones that we often see is women are undersexed and men are oversexed, which means women don't really want a lot of sex, or desire is not as high as a man's. Men just have a huge sexual appetite and they are oversexed. Part of that can be attributed, though, to historical treatments of women. And I'll give you an example that is on two completely separate ends of the spectrum. In the United States, in California, Florida, areas of that nature, women are oversexed as far as our production, or as far as our perception in media, social media. Makeup, clothing, hairstyles, everything. We are truly given an image as to what the world and society wants us to look like. And some of that involves sexualizing women. So there are many times where, just even in a movie, a woman will have on little to no clothing. And if a man is always exposed to that, because we see it on billboards, we see it on magazines in the store, we see it on TV, we see it in the movie theaters. That is how women are often portrayed in the United States. And of course, if men always see that, if that's something that they have been fed, then perception and the stereotypes will then go to men are oversexed and women are undersexed. Whereas in other countries, it is considered extremely immodest to show skin at all. You are completely covered. And in the United States, we think that that is oppressive, and overseas, they think that we're oppressed because we don't have any morals or any modesty to our dress. So it's two separate ends of the spectrum as far as, are women oversexed or are they undersexed? Well, in some areas we see that they are often sexualized, but then in other countries, particularly those where a woman has to cover her entire body, and in some countries even the head, everything but the eyes is covered, then we see how drastically the approaches to these stereotypes can be. Of course, the inexperience of women and men compared to men is often portrayed based on the fact that we are expected to be sexually pure when we are married, and therefore men are the experts. So all of these are not necessarily true. The truth of these stereotypes can vary from a little bit to a lot depending on where you are. So just because it's a stereotype does not mean it's true. It's a stereotype, not a fact. I do want to go on to the very last bullet, because this plays into violence against women. When we talk about women are passive and men are aggressive, that's just not true. Women are not passive. As a matter of fact, women are very strong. Women are extremely strong. We have high pain tolerances just to be able to give birth. So women are not strong. They're not weak and passive. What we do have, though, is an imbalance in how men approach women and how women have been trained in some aspects to react to them, or how they have been uncomfortable with certain reactions. For example, if a man approaches you as you're walking down the street, what would be your reaction to that if you were not interested? Do they become belligerent when you refuse the phone number? Are you beautiful when they call out to you on the street, but then when you refuse their advances, then you are suddenly a bitch? So that is not passivity for women. Some of that is passive aggressiveness behavior that we see portrayed in society, where men are able to do that. They are able to catcall, and oftentimes with little consequences as far as to what happens. I'm sure almost every woman can attest to having been catcalled on the street, just pumping gas, maybe crossing the street, maybe waiting at the bus stop, maybe standing in line at the bank. And that doesn't mean our reactions are passive. So these are some of the ways that stereotypes can be viewed as facts. And we know that reality is 9/10 perception. And so if this is your perception that women are passive and men are aggressive, what does that now tell our other young girls and women as we have this cyclical effect about passivity in behaviors towards aggressive men? So I want you ladies to really think about that, and gentlemen too. Are the women passive, or maybe are they intimidated and they don't know how to react because the situation is uncomfortable for them? So silence doesn't always mean passivity. Let's go ahead and move on to, oh, that slide's not working there. There we go. Sexual orientation. We talked a little bit about gender identity versus biological identity. So we know that heterosexual couples are male, female, female, male. So you like the opposite. And then same-sex couples, gay, lesbian, homosexuals. And then some people are bisexual, where they get the best of both worlds, according to them. So some people like heterosexual, some people like homosexual, some people like both. And you would be able to identify with the orientation that you see best fits your needs and wants. And then there are societal issues with sexual orientation. Traditionally, a heterosexual relationship is what society said was okay. And as a result, we have these terms such as homophobia. And I really don't believe in terms like homophobia. How are you scared of another individual based on their sexual orientation? Particularly if you don't know that they are same-sex couples or bisexual, and your behavior only changes when you find out that they are. That doesn't tell me that you're scared of someone. It tells me that you may be uncomfortable with that. So discomfort is not the same as being scared of something. I am deathly afraid of sharks. This is just an example. So I would never go swimming in an area where there are a lot of sharks. That doesn't mean that I should portray that onto somebody else. It means that me personally, I am scared of sharks. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the shark, though. It means I'm scared of it. And so a phobia is something that you are legitimately scared of, or you have some reservations about, but it doesn't mean that you treat a person differently just because they hold a different sort of sexual orientation. So I'm not sure that I really even believe in that term. And then there's profiling based on your relationships as well. There's discrimination in medical care. This happens quite a lot in the prison systems, and I believe we talked about the treatment of women in medical facilities when it comes to labor and delivery as well. So you have to really be certain, because depending on where you are in the United States, and once again, we are very fortunate to be in a blue state. We are very fortunate to have a lot of different viewpoints here. Even if you don't believe in that personally, we are exposed to it here in California. But in many areas of the country, especially the Deep South, they are traditionally very, very, very conservative. And you may have personal beliefs that pour over into the medical field and how they treat people. Now, we know that's an ethics violation, but good luck trying to prove that. And so this discrimination in medical care really is a reality for people. And as a woman, we have to be particularly careful in how we treat our bodies and the individuals that we trust to care with our bodies as well. Okay, so I'm skipping over to some common problems related to menstruation. So dysmenorrhea is painful menstrual flow. It shouldn't be painful when you start your monthly cycles. It's generally supposed to be a pain-free experience, meaning there's some normal cramping of the kind, but not anything super painful. Otherwise, that could be classified as dysmenorrhea, and you would have some prescription drugs, some over-the-counter drugs that you would take to alleviate that pain. And then, of course, we have PMS, where I want to say that most women that I know can identify with if they disagree with a man or happen to be upset that day or say something that a man doesn't agree with. They have been accused of it being PMS, when really maybe you were just wrong and we disagreed with you. So this is another stereotype that wasn't on the previous page, but I can guarantee that most of you in this class have identified with that exact situation where something was wrong. Maybe you were upset, maybe you were short-tempered that day, and it was blamed on PMS. And that's simply not the case for the vast majority of people. We're not going to go over all of these because some people's PMS can be very severe, but we're not going to talk about that one too much. There's a small section in the book that touches on it. And then we have something that's called amenorrhea, which is the lack of a menstrual flow. This happens for a couple of different reasons. Sometimes if you're underweight, so individuals who suffer from bulimia and anorexia, they often have a cessation of their menstrual cycle because they're not getting enough nutrients and their body needs to hold on to iron and blood as well. And then also athletes, women who train cross-country endurance sports, they often have a lack of menstrual flow while they're training, and when they stop training or when they cease the activity, then it goes back to normal. And that has happened to myself and several other women that I know. I'm going to skip over the pelvic exam aspects. You can read about that in your book because we'll talk about that more next week when we go into birthing options as well. But this is something that I definitely want to touch on. Sexual arousal. Most men, studies show, when they are involved in sexual intercourse, climax. It's something around the 90 something, it's definitely in the 90th percentile. Whereas women, most women, up to 80% of women do not climax or orgasm during sexual intercourse. And I mean, isn't that a gigantic difference when it comes to women's sexuality, that most women cannot actually have an orgasm? And so men, there's usually only a couple in this class, but now I'm talking to you. Most women don't orgasm. So sometimes I think that men may not realize that. And that also plays into a woman's sexuality, because then they may not enjoy the experience as much because they can't reach plateau. They can't reach an orgasm. And so men, really be aware of this fact as you engage in sexual behavior, because women often don't orgasm, and that may also have something to do with the lack of desire to have sexual intercourse. So with women being undersexed. And then sexuality through the lifespan, I'm going to skip over that and come to young and middle adulthood. So we know that as kids, it's not abnormal for kids, young kids, to touch their genitalia. They're curious. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They don't really know. It's not from a sexual nature like we think of for older adults. It's just a curiosity type of thing when they're adolescents. But as we get older, our libido starts to go down for women. It can stay high for men for a very long time. They have all sorts of products and Cialis and Viagra to help with the libido staying high. But we actually lose the desire. We lose lubrication in the vagina, especially if you've had a child. Vaginal dryness is a very real thing for many women. And it doesn't mean that you're not excited and that you don't want to engage in sexual activity. It just means that you may need some additional lubricants, and the ones that are water-based are the best and have proven to be less irritating on the female genitalia. So do keep those things in mind. I already kind of went over that, so we're going to skip over to, back up. We're going to skip over to sexual violence as a public health problem. And I really want to end on this. Sexual assault and rape, molestation, these are issues that affect, and shockingly, I'm so upset that the number is so high, because it tells me that as a society, we have not dealt with this huge problem, that 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 women, that's 20 to 25% of women, have been sexually assaulted, molested, or raped in their lifetime. I mean, those numbers are so high, and that's why we have to really be careful about where we walk, making sure that when we go to the parking lot, our keys are out, making sure we get an escort to the parking lot, making sure that we're paying attention, ensuring that we don't park by large vans and SUVs in the middle of the night, making sure that our daughters, we're always holding on to them, because these are real problems. Female genitalia mutilation in some countries, it's called female circumcision, and this is practiced in some parts of Africa as well through tribal rituals. And it's very alarming. It's very painful for the woman, and it actually causes them to not enjoy sexual intercourse with their partners later on in life. And then we come to forced sterilization. This happens with individuals who may have cognitive dysfunctions, the mentally challenged, women who are in prisons. There are issues with forced sterilization for low economic status and poverty-stricken women. And it's just very, very sad. And so as we come down to our last slide with informed decision making, consider all of those things that we have talked about today. Consider what you really want from sexual behavior as a woman. Consider how you can protect yourself. Think about the health ramifications and the importance of having regular pap smears, which now are not every year. And I was happy with this too. Now every 3 years, unless you change sexual partners. So think about that, how you can protect yourself, the communication that you should have between your parents, the children, and the healthcare professionals, and really educating yourself on sexual health for women. So I hope you have enjoyed this presentation, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye now.